morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching or listening. I'm Dan Turchin, CEO of InsightFinder. Excited to be hosting today's discussion with Janice Gobert, CEO and co-founder of Apprendis, and Mike Pedro, CTO and co-founder of Apprendis. Now, we love all our customers, but especially ones that are making the world better with AI. Apprendis is solidly on that list. A bit of background before we open up to the discussion with our guests. We're here today because we all recognize the same special opportunity to change the world with data. AI is about more than algorithms and more than data models. It's really about making humans the best versions of ourselves by automating what's routine and augmenting our ability to learn. There's an unimaginably large volume of data exhaust generated by modern apps, on the order of 2.5 quintillion bytes per day, and for those non-math majors, that's 25 with 18 zeros. That data contains all the answers to avoid outages, and yet taming it is a problem that really is too complex for humans. Machines are responsible for creating all this noise, so it's logical that smart machines will help get us out of this problem. At InsightFinder, we pride ourselves on being the AI-first system of intelligence for IT operations. Our products use unsupervised machine learning to automate the life cycle of IT incidents. They detect anomalies across metrics and logs by learning from streams of data using multivariate analysis. They use detected anomalies to predict when incidents will occur, often with 5 to 7 hours of advance notice. They use network topologies and predicted incidents to identify the root cause of issues. And finally, they recommend the best action to take to remediate incidents before end users are impacted. Now, personally, I've been in this space for over 23 years working on this problem of using AI to automate the life cycle of IT issues. Unlike any of the probably 100 or so other automation tools for IT, I can say with confidence that only InsightFinder kind of wraps a layer of intelligence horizontally around that entire process to accurately detect anomalies, predict incidents, and auto-remediate them. It's gratifying to finally have the technology that CIOs and CTOs have been expecting, asking for, begging for at least a decade. This team, this product, and our amazing customers are a combination like nothing I've ever seen. Our proudest moments are when we get to share our customer success. Well, today you're in for a treat. You'll hear how Apprendis helps students in more than 80 countries learn science, thanks to unique adaptive learning technology and AI from InsightFinder. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Janice and Mike, CEO and CTO of Apprendis. Janice and Mike, welcome to today's fireside chat. Why don't you start by sharing a little bit about your background and maybe share with our audience the founding vision for Apprendis.
Great, thanks for having us, Dan. So I'm Janice Gobert, I'm CEO of Apprendis, and I'm a professor of learning sciences at Rutgers Graduate School of Education. I have a PhD from University of Toronto, and I did my doctorate with the very first, with the lab that developed the very first educational networked software in the world. So this is sort of in my DNA. I've been thinking about this since the 80s. As I said, I'm a cognitive science by training, and my training's from University of Toronto, and my master's is from McGill University. Mike, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, it's nice to meet everybody. Hello, thank you for attending. Mike Pedro, I'm CTO and co-founder of Apprendis. My background is actually a combination of learning science and computer science. Back in the day, I used to do defense contracting with a focus on artificial intelligence, and ended up meeting Janice and found a way to apply artificial intelligence to science education. And since then, the work that we've done together now has spun off into Inkits, and it's a dream come true to be able to take your dissertation, part of your dissertation research, and scale it up into something that can be used worldwide.
Talk to us about the founding vision for the company.
So let's start with the context that science performance by American students is very poor compared to other countries. So for example, on our last international test, we scored 18th, and most Americans are always very surprised by that we didn't score, in the top 5, but we're not even close. So the next generation science standards are a national framework that seeks to rectify students' performance. And what it does is it prescribes the science skills that students must obtain and that teachers must assess. So these are skills at forming hypotheses, collecting and interpreting data, experimenting, and communicating findings. So these competencies are very different from the low-level rote science facts that can be assessed using multiple choice items. And that's why you actually need AI to assess these competencies, and how use a product like InsightFinder to help us ensure that we can move forward. So our student platform is called Inkits, and our teacher platform is called InkBlotter, where Ink stands for inquiry, so Inquiry Intelligent Tutoring System, and InkBlotter. And we sought to provide teachers and students optimal materials for science instruction and learning. And we did this by using what we know from research about human learning to design and develop these materials, and then leverage cutting-edge AI to auto-score students' competencies at doing science and writing about science, and then utilizing InsightFinder to ensure the delivery of these tools. So in terms of the technology behind it, let me just say a little bit about how Apprendis works, or Inkits works. So students conduct science experiments, that is, they form hypotheses, collect data, interpret data, and communicate their findings. And all data is logged. So this includes every mouse click, every time on task, every choice or input a student makes, every change to a simulation, everything they write. Our system tracks and logs all these data in real time, and our patented algorithms developed using machine learning and natural language processing techniques score students' competencies in real time. So again, this is very different from multiple choice or fill in the blank assessment. So with this real-time AI scoring, teachers get automatic reports that eliminates their grading of students' work, and they can compare students' abilities to do science, conduct experiments, for example, with their ability to write about science, which is a different type of competency. And this is important because we've shown with our research that if teachers rely on what students write, between 30 to 60% of kids are misassessed. So you have students who can do science but can't write about it, or students who are just catching the buzz in the classroom and parroting what they've read or learned, but actually what they've read or heard, but they're actually not learning. So furthermore, the data on these competencies are provided to teachers in real time. Alerts are provided in real time so that teachers can change instruction on the fly, do differentiated instruction to small groups, do one-to-one tutoring, etc. So additionally, while students work, a digital agent, Rex, can jump in real time to provide personalized data to students. And this is important now because many students need remediation due to loss during COVID. So where AI and InsightFinder come in is as follows. So the log data that are collected and analyzed in real time are very dense. So log data are different from traditional pencil and paper data due to what we call the 4 V's. And the algorithms can handle the 4 V's in students' log data. So I'm going to drill down on the 4 V's. So first of all, we have the volume at which log data are generated, the velocity, the speed at which they're hitting our servers, the veracity that's reflected in the fine-grained log files that students are generating, and the variability, since there are many ways in which students can conduct an experiment. Similarly, highly precise natural language processing algorithms are auto-scoring what students are writing, and these are better than hand scoring. And these, of course, again, are hitting our servers in real time. So now that we're implemented in 50 states and many countries across the world, InsightFinder is used to make sure that we don't have any outages, because as you can imagine, the technical demands on our system that require us to track, assess, and respond in real time are extremely high. So Dan wanted me to address how Apprendis could change the world faster if we could focus 100% of our technological resources on innovation without regard for performance or scalability. And the important thing here is that we could spend our time doing broad scale implementation of our products into schools worldwide. Furthermore, we could possibly develop other innovations which are tech focused. Now, in terms of what's ahead for Apprendis as both a technology platform and a company, what we think we'd like to do is continue to flesh out our high school offering, undergird all our middle school science materials with mathematics functionality so students can integrate math and science. And then we possibly might develop an elementary platform for science. Furthermore, we seek to scale these worldwide since most, if not all, countries are aligned in terms of their international frameworks for science and math. Dan also asked me to comment on the future of education and what role technology will play in defining that future. So after COVID, if COVID ever ends, students will not want to go back to the way things were in face-to-face classrooms pre-COVID. Many teachers will not either. So for example, students are not going to want to be held back if they're used to moving ahead at their own pace. Students are going to want very tightly prescribed instruction that's personalized. And what technology offers is the promise of ubiquitous learning, that is, anytime, any place learning can be realized. So students' competencies can be more precisely assessed and in turn honed in real time. Therefore, assessment, learning, and remediation will be fully blended. Furthermore, we can put students on more direct pathways to their career goals. This aligns with the future of work initiatives that are underway worldwide. That is, there's a prediction that many companies are going to seek to train their employees for precise competencies they want their staff to have. So for example, Google might have its own university, Apple might have its own university, etc. And AI-based technologies will play a huge role here. One of the things that you asked me to comment on, Dan, was to share how specific customers are benefiting from Apprendis. And I chose to comment on this with respect to pre-COVID and now. So before COVID, teachers and students were using Inkets and Ink Blotter for in-class learning. Teachers were able to change instruction on the fly, report out even small improvements in students' learning. For example, this is important with special ed students whose trajectories are much longer. And students were showing huge learning gains on the core science skills I referred to earlier, and they were able to transfer them over long periods of time and to new topics, both of which are robust measures of learning. But since COVID, students are able to use Inkets from home remotely. We have seen a huge increase in our usage, and I'll ask Mike to comment on that since he has his finger on the pulse of our usage daily. And teachers are able to use our systems synchronously when paired with systems like Google Hangouts or Zoom to conduct instruction as if students were face-to-face. In fact, we've shown that many students have performed as well or better from home with Inkets as they did in their face-to-face classrooms pre-COVID.
You were both educating me about a specific instance where the platform was used to help remediate learning loss. And I thought that was a fascinating example. Maybe if you could share a little bit more background about how a combination of Rex and Blotter were used to address that.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So what is typical when students are away from school, like in the summer, just imagine a typical summer pre-COVID, is that students' performance in science, math, reading degrades over the summer. This is particularly problematic for students of color, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and students who are English language learners. Those effects are particularly pronounced. So one of the things that we've been addressing in our data, in fact, we just submitted a paper a few months ago on this, is looking at how students' performance changed over time in our system pre-COVID and post-COVID. And what we have been able to show is that students, many of whom are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and many of whom are English language learners, their performance was as good or better post-COVID, or post working from home during COVID rather, than it was in face-to-face with InKids. And that's a really interesting finding because it's very atypical, and it's not it's typically with these populations where their performance does degrade. So we've been drilling down, looking at our technology and addressing with teachers what they did and what they are doing to support students remotely as they're educating their students during COVID remotely. So Rex can jump in real time when the system detects that the student is floundering. So this is built into our AI-based algorithms rather than have on-demand help. On-demand help is only useful if a student knows they're floundering. Well, many times a student doesn't know they're floundering. And second of all, students will drill down to get what's called the bottom-out hint, or the most specific hint, but that doesn't really lead to their learning if they're not processing the information that the digital agent is giving them. So our system is designed differently. We don't have on-demand help. We jump in when the system detects the student is floundering. At the same time, the teacher is getting alerts on Inkblotter as to how students are performing. So the teacher can be looking remotely using Google Classrooms or Zoom, looking at student performance on their Inkblotter and seeing something like, wow, 70% of my class are forming a hypothesis that is not empirically testable. Or 70% of my class are changing too many variables at once. When this sort of thing happens, it's not productive to let the kids continue down the inquiry path. Rather, you should stop the class in real time and address the issues that students are having. Because our system is giving very fine-grained alerts, specifically on how students are floundering and the proportion of students that are floundering with that specific practice or a skill, the teacher can stop the class to inform them or change instruction on the fly as to what students really need in the moment. So say, for example, if they're changing too many variables at once when they're experimenting, when they get to the next phase of data interpretation, those data are what's called confounded or uninterpretable. Well, that's a complete waste of a learning opportunity. So technology like this that can jump in real time saves teachers time, but also saves students frustration. Because imagine if you collected all these data points and then you find out that the data are confounded, right? So Rex will jump in and support the student to collect unconfounded data. Now, if a lot of students are having that problem, the teacher can decide with the Inkblotter alert to stop the class in real time and have a whole class discussion about how you make sure that you're varying the right variables in order to collect unconfounded data that can then subsequently be interpreted.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the challenges or the biggest impediments to scaling the infrastructure required to support that kind of big vision that Janice has been describing?
Sure. So just as a little teaser, we're starting to approach the 100,000 user base, and we are growing our user base pretty fast. And as that happens, as Janice has mentioned, right, there's more logs that are being generated, more data, more real-time interaction between students and teachers across the world, right? So scalability is becoming a huge issue for us, or it will be, because we need to stay on top of it. I would say the two biggest issues are probably time and money, which sort of equates to manpower, right? I need more people to be doing more things. I need more people for innovation. I need more people to maintain and monitor the infrastructure, or I need an alternative for doing that, because our team is pretty specialized and unique in our ability to develop educational software. And so we're always looking for ways that we can scale more quickly with less manpower, less money. I'd say the biggest issues then around there would be we have a lot of different APIs that we integrate with. There's so many data streams. Because it's web-based software, there are so many different combinations of platforms that we need to work on, whether it's this version of Chrome browser on this device or mobile platform or a tablet or this and that. And right now, everybody knows who's done web development. All browsers aren't created equally, and everybody sort of interprets their JavaScript just a little bit differently than another one, and that can make for some interesting issues that arise up, especially when you're dealing with interactive kinds of educational activities. On the back end too, there are so many knobs to twiddle to make sure that you're scaling appropriately and getting the most out of your system, whether they be database parameters, application parameters, web server parameters, and whatnot. And then another vector that's really challenging for us as well is security and maintaining security. So we need to be compliant not only with national security for student data, but there's also state level requirements, and some districts even have their own unique requirements as well. And so how do we know that we're meeting all the security needs of all of our customers when the security needs are so different?
Any specific examples of how AI has helped you scale your infrastructure?
Yeah, so I'd say the most important thing right now, especially using InsightFinder, is I don't have to keep my eyes on the system at all time. I feel like that I have an armada of people working for me, watching the system and letting me know when something looks suspicious or something has gone awry, whether it be from the security angle or from the system performance angle. And when something does, I get an email or I get a notification that's telling me something's up. And I've got a couple of stories of where that's come in handy. One in particular is we made a code push recently, and within minutes, I got an email saying, hey, there's some sort of weird error logging happening. And it was some sort of PHP errors that were popping up that we didn't expect, that didn't come up in testing. And that was a notification right away. Oh, there was an issue with the code that we needed to address that we didn't account for, and that could have led to outages. The second one actually has to do more with security, is that because of InsightFinder monitoring some of our system logs, it was able to detect that people were trying to hack into our database. And though nobody was successful, it gave us a heads up that we needed to start blacklisting certain IP addresses that were trying to attack the web servers and the database server. And again, it makes the system more secure. And it's something that I would have had to spend hours wading through tons of log files to have found on my own, where InsightFinder told me in a matter of minutes that it was a problem, and I got notified of it right away.
Well, you're certainly qualified to teach a course on using AI in IT. Maybe any advice you have for those who are just starting along on their journey?
Yeah, if there's people in the audience who have never used technology like this, or if you're like me who don't have, I actually don't come from a DevOps or information technology background. So prior to about like 5 years ago, I'd never even configured a web server. So I've been sort of learning on the go here, learning on the fly. My suggestions would be to start small. And decide on something that you think is important for your application to scale, or something that you care about for security. So for example, is it your web server performance? Is it the number of requests that you can handle concurrently? Do you have a problem with latency time? Does it take too long for your web pages to load? Do you care about security anomalies and tracking that? Like, is that a huge issue in your infrastructure right now that you need to be fully aware of any small security issue that happens? Maybe you're trying to scale up the number of maximum users that you can handle at the same time, right? Pick something that you want to optimize over. And I think in the InsightFinder world, they call it KPIs, key performance indicators. Pick one to start off with. The second thing I would say is that it's all about the data, right? Anything having to do with data mining is only as good as the data that you're giving it. So if you're giving junk in, you're going to get junk out. So the first question I'd ask is, where do you think the most important information about your system's health or your usage is? Where do you think that the main issues would be for your key performance indicator and your latency time? Is it web server logs? Is it web server parameters? Is it database logs? Is it database proxy logs? deciding what you want to feed into an intelligent system is a great place. If it has to do with application logs, this is something that I highly recommend, is to try and get them into a consistent format across all your applications to make sure that they're all formatted correctly and that they contain the kinds of metadata that you think will be useful for a system to make inferences. InsightFinder is actually really great at that all of our application logs are kind of disparate in how they generate application logs, and it's been able to take all of those different formats and still be able to make sense out of them. So that's been great. But I can only imagine how much better it could do if we on our back end were generating more consistent logs. The last part would be to set up email notifications like we did, because that's been the real key for me. Of when something goes wrong, it's telling me right away what it is, and then I can do some investigation to see if it's a real error.
This one might be for both of you. So at InsightFinder, we're really rooting for Apprendis to change the world. What are some of the things from a technology or even an infrastructure perspective that would help Apprendis grow faster?
That's a good question. I'm gonna speak to one cultural or sort of ecological change, which is, there was a time when we started, and we're the first group in the world to use machine learning in this way. There was a time when no teachers had ever heard about something like this. Now that they have this, they don't want something coarse-grained like multiple choice assessment. They simply don't want it. So I think the ecology of schools and the culture of schools is going to change, accelerated by COVID, actually, because of the need for digital materials. And simply putting textbooks on iPads is not going to suffice, right? The genie is out of the bottle, and now teachers realize and students realize the possibility for real-time, any-place learning that's adaptive and personalized and can hone and assess in real time. And they just simply don't want to go back to like worksheets and iPad activities that are just like a textbook, right? So the digitization of education is really, really accelerated. And the knowledge about how AI can drive this, I believe, is kind of reached the public sphere as well. Could you add to that, Mike, from a technical point?
Yeah, from a technical point, I would say that any way that we can take our focus away from I would say the dotting your I's and crossing your T's of just running a web application. So monitoring system performance, addressing scalability issues, the stuff that takes us away from being innovators, any way that we can devote more time to being innovators and doing the things that we can do best, that's how we're going to keep winning in our game, right? Because that's what we specialize in, that's what we're good at, and that's what we want to be spending our time on doing. So I would just say any way to speed up the mechanics of running the business is probably going to help us go even faster.
What's up ahead for Apprendis? Again, you've got such a bold vision, and the success that your teachers and learners are having is amazing. How big can Apprendis become?
World dominance. We really want to scale this broadly. This is our legacy. I think for Cameron, who's our co-founder, and Mike and myself, this is really, I think, our child, right? We conceived of this, the three of us, and we want it to scale broadly because we really want to affect change in students' lives and affect change in teachers' lives. And, education is one of those disciplines, unfortunately, that innovation in education is a little bit of a misnomer. But as I said a few minutes ago, I think driven by COVID, digitization has come a long way, and it's accelerating at a really, really rapid rate because of the interest in AI, because of the need driven by COVID, and the realization that people are not going to want to go back to textbook-based learning, right? And it's not the case that we'll never use textbooks, but it is the case that for many, many things, and the future of work, we really need to hone competencies that are important to and authentic to the skills that we want people to have. And textbook learning doesn't really lend itself well to basically engendering those skills, measuring those skills, of course, not doing any of that on the fly. So that's where technology really can play a role, and that's where we want to stay front and center with respect to science. That's really our main bread and butter. But as I said a little earlier too, we have invested a lot of time and energy in our natural language processing algorithms that score what students write. Our algorithms are very, very accurate in terms of their correspondence with human scores, and this saves teachers an unbelievable amount of time. And it's a part of their job that they don't really like, evaluating students' writing. So we will continue to develop tech that supports teachers and supports students, that's authentic to the kinds of skills that we know the future of work is geared towards.
Now, if it's okay, I want to transition over to a few good questions that have come in from the group, and then we've got a few minutes before we're gonna have to wrap this up. It feels like we're just getting started. But one of the questions that I want to make sure you can respond to is, will there ever be a time when teachers are replaced by services like Apprendis?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's a question that we get a lot. I really think that it would be extremely arrogant to suggest that we will replace teachers, because even though our system is very sophisticated and can detect affective states as well, boredom, frustration, confusion, off-task behavior, etc., we still do not know your students the way that teachers know their students. And so what we want to do is support teachers and take the burden off of the activities that are, first of all, very difficult to do in real time. A teacher simply can't run around the class while 30, 40 or more, 50 students, like in Oregon, are working on computers and doing science experimentation on computers. A teacher simply can't provide the kind of feedback that students need. So with a system like ours, the teacher knows when to stop the class when 70%, like I said before, are struggling with a certain practice. So what we want to do is we want to use technology and leverage technology to put very skilled, very sophisticated materials into teachers' hands and students' hands to make the learning process more rigorous and the assessment process more rigorous. And we don't intend to replace teachers. And I think that we will really, if that would be the goal of AI, we'll really miss out on something very fundamental, because school is much more about learning. And I say this as a cognitive scientist, school is much more about learning. And we do need teachers to support students in a variety of ways.
I love that vision. The second question that came in from the audience, maybe this is better for Mike or perhaps both of you. Did you evaluate other AI tools before selecting InsightFinder?
Prior to InsightFinder, we had spent some time sort of investigating. We had set up CloudWatch logs, and we were just staying within the AWS infrastructure itself. And there wasn't anything comparable within at least AWS that offered quite what InsightFinder had, combining not only the integration of the integration of all of our systems and logs, but also the ability to track root causes. And so not only it can detect problems, but it can help us find the reasons why that there are issues with it. And InsightFinder was also a good choice for us because it worked so well with the AWS infrastructure that we already had set up.
Now we got time for one last one, but I want to make sure we get this in. How can the audience learn more about Inkits?
Well, that's easy. So you can go to YouTube and type in Inkits, and we have a lot of videos. You can go to our website, inkits.com or apprendis.com. And there's a lot of information there. There's publications you can download. You can also read various teacher testimonials that are on our website. You can try a free trial if you'd like, as a sign up as a teacher if you'd like. We do offer free trials to teachers. So if there's any teachers on the call who would like to try Inkits, we can support you in onboarding your classes as well.
Before we wrap, I'll share a personal testimonial, which is that I use Inkits and Blotter with my kids and love it, and really believe in the passion that Janice and that Mike have for this space, this technology. I share it. I believe in the vision for the future of education that Janice shared, and would really encourage everyone to go out and try it for yourselves, get a sense of what's up ahead. And thank you for the kind words about InsightFinder as well. Before we wrap up today's session, you've got contact information there on the screen. We'd encourage you, just like Janice encourages you to try out Apprendis, we encourage you to try out InsightFinder. Everything you heard Mike talk about, it's available for a free trial. Go to insightfinder.com/request-trial. And a quote that I'll leave you with before we wrap up today's discussion: what can be predicted is better left to machines. What requires intuition or empathy is better left to humans. And I think that's a good way to wrap up today's conversation. You learned a little bit about the future of education and the future of learning, and a little bit about the future of AI-driven systems of intelligence for IT infrastructure. Thanks to everyone who joined today's session. We'll be back next month with another fascinating guest discussing the future of IT automation.